the archive, some things they don't know what they are. I spent months on this, and then in the space, okay, it's based on a project of John Cage called Roly Holy Over, which was a score and a project for the visual arts from John Cage, where he imagined that, I simplify it now, he imagined that the works of art would be changed according to chance in the space. So over a period of time, there's different versions of this while he was still alive, and afterwards I chose to say that it was inspired by, because I didn't want to be limited by his exact concept, but I made a score in which the objects would be moved around the space, and it was quite complicated because we needed these like museum objects. Actually, this big roll here is a teaching chart from Arnold Dreyblatt that they have there, that they don't know why they have it and how it got there. And I just mixed the things. So, okay, this I have a depot where the stuff is kept, which is also, John Cage called it a reservoir. And you actually see the people coming, the restorators and the curators, they come in from the archive and take stuff out and rehang it according to the score. And you can look in there, and in fact I had recordings of speakers reading the entire provenance of all the objects. And you see actually these two African busts were copies. They're from 1774 from a German artist, and one is a 3D copy and one is an original. And it's also a question, how did this come in with all our questions about post-colonialism and so forth. Above there's a Brecht, a stage design for a Brecht play from the Brecht archive, a microphone that they found in someone's archive, but they don't know why it's in there and so forth. And then on the right is the score for the days, so it changed every second, third, and fourth day. So people that came saw always a different exhibition, and I had a kind of a fake closed-circuit TV that filmed the changes when they would come and change it, so that you would see that, and we developed this whole system of you can see these kind of vitrines on wheels with different size plastic containers for all the objects. We had to figure that out before, and on this wall, this John Cage, Nanjing Pike video. On the right is a drawing by Erich Mendelsohn. So these things all collided with each other at different times. There's also a question about, about fame, about authorship, and we had to put up all the nails and screws for the entire 4-month period beforehand, which took 2 weeks, so that we wouldn't have to do that during the period. But you can see here's the screws, and even we had media stuff. This is the archive. We had kind of a little library with information about it and so forth. So actually on the right is interesting because there's this, in there those are photos from the Berlin ensemble, if any of you know. That's where the Brecht Theater, photos of people that work there, we don't know who they are, but it was in a little envelope. And it's the kind of thing like, they would want to show something very prominent, and then I went and I found this envelope and I said, what's this? And they said, well, we don't know really, we think they worked there. So, okay, great, let's show it. So, okay, so I end with that, and if you're all still alive, I mean, I could go on and show more, because there's other different kinds of projects, but it gives a kind of an idea of the breadth of my work. And do you have any questions? Don't be shy. I was teaching for years, so you can ask me anything.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, there was the first project that was projected onto the room, onto the walls, and read out loud. The words were selected, and it was read out loud. And
what was the first project?
Like the first project that he showed us, where it was projected onto the wall and onto something that was kind of like an installation.
Oh yeah, the recollection mechanism. Yes.
And what was
okay, it was a
material?
screen. It was actually kind of the screen material that you use in windows for mosquitoes.
Oh really?
And we at that time I worked with an architect, an Italian architect. We looked for a lot of different materials that you could do that with. It doesn't work with modern screen material, only works with the older material. That's, I think it was steel, but yeah, it doubles and triples the image. So, and it's in a spiral. It's hung from the ceiling in a spiral, and then there were two projectors, one on the top and one on the bottom. So there's two different. I would say it's the masculine, feminine voice, and there are two computers, so they're both looking through the database and finding it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
I have a strange question. Do you think if there is a real connection between sound and lights? I mean, because there are so many experiences and attempts to make some kind of connection.
Yeah, it's a very old.
And do you think if there is one real connection, or it's always about like metaphorical kind of?
Well, there's a connection in terms of waves. Yeah, I think that's the important connection. So of course, you know, as waves get to a certain point, they start to glow. I mean, that's the only way to say it. Of course, it's more complicated because at a certain point it becomes electromagnetic energy. You know, I'm not a physicist, but if you just imagine, my old friend Tony Conrad, he did a concert where he took certain frequency relationships and he slowed them down till they became rhythms. You know, but if you go in the other direction, of course, at some point it's no longer perceivable as maybe, certainly not, it goes out of the range of human hearing. And then gradually, you know, it gets to a certain point, it, you know, theoretically, it's the electron, I mean, the nicest way to say it is the electrons start getting a little excited, you know, and heating up, and then, you know, they, something else happens. But the behavior of waves, okay, there's all this discussion about like wavicles. Is it discrete? Is it really waves? You know, is a discussion in physics, so I won't get into that. But certainly, I think very important in that discussion is the analysis of a wave, like wave analysis, and then trying to understand light as a, you know, certainly has, those are frequencies. But okay, the behavior then changes, of course. You know, or think of it as energy, you know, in some form. So even sound is, like I was saying, it's, you know, if it's higher frequencies, you don't feel it as movement, but you know, if it's lower, you feel it, lower frequencies. But it is, it's movement of air that's, you know, detected in some way by our ears, like inside and actually processed and turned into neurons. It's a whole nother, I have actually a music lecture also, so where it talks about what happens in sound. You know, it's, you know, there's a membrane that's somehow vibrating, and the size and material of the membrane determines something about, you know, the type of sound and the frequency and so forth, and it's timbre, whether it's harmonic or inharmonic, and then something passes through the ear, and then it's very quickly, I mean, it makes something in there vibrate again, and then that creates another signal, which is then interpreted. You know, so you know, which is maybe I think very important to understand about sound. There's a lot of misconceptions. What is it? Especially now that we you know, we see the waves, we can see it in software much more easily. In my time, there was oscilloscopes. Basically, the video art we were doing was basically a multi-line oscilloscope. Or the oscilloscope, you can say, is one line of video, of analog video. I mean, this metaphorical thing and trying to develop some sort of mystical connotations. I mean, there are people that have synesthesia. You know, there are people that perceive certain sounds as colors, yeah, for instance. And that's proven, but it doesn't mean the sound is that color. And then there are, of course, once you get into wavelengths of light, yeah, there are different colors of light. So, and there are many frequencies that we're not sensitive to. So, I mean, actually going back to my Woody Vasulka, you say, yeah, if we were sensitive to, if our brains could perceive all of these different frequencies that are in the air or around us, we couldn't move because we would be kind of like bumping into this, or we would feel paralyzed because there'd be too much information. So it's selective, because there's a lot of rays around us, a lot of different.
Do you think there is a difference in the sensitivity of our auditory and visual senses? I mean,
Yes, absolutely, which affects like how we perceive artworks also, because sound is spatial. The lower frequencies can be located. The higher frequencies are more difficult to locate them. That's why a subwoofer doesn't matter where you put it. And but there's also a difference. Sidney Cavell, who's a film historian, wrote this text that I like. It's a little bit, maybe goes in the wrong direction. It's kind of a religious metaphor, but he says, like, in earlier times, people would hear voices, like schizophrenics hear voices. They're confused. They have hallucinations. You hear, or like, I don't know, these, Jesus, or these kind of people would be called. You'd say, I was called, like God called to me, and then you would be called to go somewhere, or you would be crazy. And but he said, if you see God, then you're gone. You're no longer in this world. And there's something about seeing as defining something that music or sound cannot do. Sound it doesn't define things in the same way, which I think is important. It's just like I could make you listen to, maybe I could make you listen to music for an hour here, an hour and a half, but I couldn't make you listen to almost the same image. You probably wouldn't want to sit and look at the same thing for an hour and a half. That didn't change at all. So there are all those things about attention, what is attention for image and for sound, and how we're used to explaining things through an image, and how can sound work that way? I mean, there are certainly, there's a differentiation for there. So, which one can play with in artworks by, to try to be suggestive. I think sound for me is suggestive, and an image for me in a way can't be. I mean, it can be a bit suggestive, but you're always kind of trying to decode it in a certain way. So what is it? What am I seeing? And whereas hearing, we're somehow a little bit more open. But I'm just babbling about it. But it's an interesting thought. Even though a lot of these translations from sound to image or image to sound are often very arbitrary, I find.
I wanted to ask, actually, in your CRT video work, if you can call it a video work, light work,
That's my video work.
or like a light artwork.
It is video, it's video. Or what we used to call video.
Was the audio signal directly related
Yes,
to?
yes,
So like it was kind of like extrapolated or transposed?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly that particular one, but at that time I was working a lot with taking the
an
video
method.
signal out, and of course I would process it a bit, or bring it into an octave that you could hear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
because
basically
often
that's
it's
what
not-
he was asking.
Yeah,
That's what you
I
did.
don't remember what direction that was going. Could be both, whether it was going in or coming out. But I was certainly involved with both. And that was the interesting thing, that the medium itself, that's what I was trying to say, was basically analog signals. So and you could take that out of the TV. We're in another world now. So
If we have more time, maybe, I don't know, like, do you have some more samples of that?
I think the students, they're gonna pass out. Or
Like
do you have any? So do any of you have any more questions or thoughts? Nothing? You can say anything.
Well, actually, the idea was that, yeah, so first, yeah, let me thank you for your
Oh, yeah.
great lecture. Thank you also for your attention, and yeah, we have a bit of snacks here, so we can eventually
We can-
go informal.
right.
And,
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
Can I say something?
What?
Can I say something?
No.
Done.